There is a moment somewhere in your past, you do not know which one, that changed everything that came after. Your job, the city you live in, the person sleeping next to you tonight. Whether you are alive at this exact second, you were present for that moment. You just did not notice it. That is not a metaphor. That is not philosophy. That is physics. The universe runs on a principle so counterintuitive that when scientists first encountered it, they assumed something had gone wrong with their equipment. It took years for them to accept what they were seeing. The principle is this: in any sufficiently complex system, weather, economies, human lives, the smallest possible change in starting conditions produces outcomes so different they look completely unrelated. A butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil. Weeks later, a tornado tears through Texas. The air pressure shifted by a fraction of a fraction. That fraction compounded and compounded and compounded until the world looked nothing like it would have otherwise. Here is what nobody tells you about the butterfly effect. It is not about butterflies. It's not even about weather. What it actually reveals about your life, your choices, the specific version of reality you are currently living in, is something scientists have known for decades and almost nobody has fully sat with. Because the butterfly effect doesn't just say small things have big consequences. It says something far more disturbing than that. And we are going to get there. In 1961, a meteorologist named Edward Lorenz made a rounding error. That's it. That is the whole story. He typed 0.506 instead of 0.506127. A difference so small it should not have mattered. A difference that would have meant nothing in any other context. In a stable system, it would have evaporated, corrected itself, disappeared into the noise. Instead, it ate the entire simulation. What came back when he returned from getting coffee was not a slightly different weather system. It was an unrecognizable one. Same starting point, same equations, one number shaved by a fraction, two completely different realities. Lorenz sought with what this meant for a long time before publishing it, because what it meant was not a minor technical correction to weather forecasting. What it meant was that perfect prediction of weather or anything sufficiently complex is not something better computers will eventually solve. It's something the structure of reality itself prevents. To predict a weather system long-term, you would need the exact position and momentum of every molecule of air on Earth simultaneously. That information does not exist anywhere, not in any computer, not in any instrument, not in any form. The universe is not withholding the data. The universe does not have it. Lorenz called it sensitive dependence on initial conditions, a small change, a compounding effect, an outcome bearing no visible relationship to its cause. Everyone heard that and thought, interesting, butterflies, weather, chaos, a science story. Nobody applied it to the right system. Here's where your brain goes wrong. When you think about the moments that changed your life, you picture the big ones, the job you accepted, the relationship you chose, the city you moved to, the decision you turned over in your head for weeks before finally committing to. You assume the moments that changed your life were the ones you were paying attention to. But that's not how causality works inside a chaotic system. In a chaotic system, the inputs that carry the most weight are not necessarily the largest ones. They are the sensitive ones, the inputs arriving at the precise moment when the system is balanced on an edge so thin that the pressure of a single variable tips it in one direction rather than another. The job you agonized over for weeks? The system was stable enough to absorb your deliberation. Either outcome was survivable. But somewhere, on a Tuesday you don't remember, on a commute you have completely forgotten, something happened. You were 2 minutes late, or you weren't. You held a door for someone, or you let it close. You looked up from your phone at a specific second, or you kept scrolling. That was the block. Not the one you were watching, the one you weren't watching. Now here's where it gets worse. In 1962, a Soviet naval officer named Vasily Arkhipov was stationed on a nuclear submarine during the Cuban Missile Crisis. American ships were dropping depth charges above them, not to attack, but to signal the submarine to surface. The crew did not know that. The captain believed war had already started. He ordered a nuclear torpedo launched. Under Soviet protocol, the launch required unanimous agreement from 3 senior officers. 2 agreed immediately. Arkhipov said no. That was it. World War III did not happen because of a decision made by one man in a sealed room under crushing pressure, in a submarine, in the dark, and under a minute. Every person alive today, every country that currently exists, every technology you are using right now, all of it is downstream of one man's decision in 1962, a decision that took perhaps 30 seconds. Arkhipov had no idea what was riding on it. He was just a man in a room saying no. But Arkhipov knew he was making a decision. He was at least present for it. What happens when the moment that changes everything is one where nobody decides anything at all, where the hinge is something that doesn't feel like a choice in any recognizable sense? In chaos theory, there's a concept called a strange attractor. It describes a pattern that a chaotic system keeps gravitating towards regardless of how it starts. What this reveals is something almost impossible to sit with. Some outcomes were always going to happen. The system was pulling toward them before the first variable was even set. But you can't identify the strange attractor until the pattern has already formed. You can't see it from inside the system, only from outside, only after. Which means from inside your own life, you can't tell the difference between a genuine choice and a moment where the outcome was already decided and you're simply the mechanism the system is using to arrive there. Those two things, real agency and the illusion of it, feel completely identical from the inside. You thought this was about weather models and submarines and a dead meteorologist in the 1960s. It's not. It's about this morning. The route you took, the conversation you had or skipped, the message you sent or decided to leave until tomorrow, the thing you almost did and then didn't bother with. These are not neutral events being logged and filed somewhere. They are inputs into a system so intricate that their effects won't surface for months or years or decades. And when those effects arrive, and they will, you won't be able to trace them back to here. The chain will be too long, the variables too many, the original moment completely invisible by then. The moment that changes the rest of your life may have already happened. This week, today, in the last hour. You don't know. You can't know. That's not a limitation of your intelligence. That's a property of the system you're living inside. Physicists have spent 60 years with this and arrived at exactly one agreement. The mechanism is real. The math is settled. And what it means for a person living inside a chaotic system, nobody knows. There are people who find that freeing. If the hinge moments are invisible, then the pressure you put on your deliberate choices is mostly feeder. The big decisions aren't where it's happening. Stop performing anguish over them. There are people who find it the opposite of freeing. If everything compounds and nothing is traceable, then nothing is small. The weight is always there, you just can't feel it, which is worse. Lorenz himself never resolved it. He spent the rest of his career refining the mathematics of unpredictability. He got very precise about exactly how little we can know. That was apparently enough for him. It doesn't have to be enough for you. Tomorrow morning, you will do something ordinary. Make coffee, leave the house, sit somewhere, look at your phone or not look at it. Walk past someone in a corridor, choose a seat or take the first one available. You will feel nothing significant about any of it. And somewhere in that unremarkable chain, you won't know where, will be the one, the sensitive input, the block that looked like every other block until it wasn't. The fraction of a degree that compounded across the next 10 years becomes a completely different life than the one you are currently expecting. You have already lived through thousands of these without knowing. You are about to live through more. The question is not whether you can identify which moment it is. Lorenz settled that in 1961 with a rounding error and a coffee break. The question is what it means to move through ordinary days, knowing that any one of them, without announcement, without weight, without any signal that it matters, could already be the one that changed everything.